of witch hunt on the defence official that released the spreadsheet that caused this
It's not a witch hunt. It's accountability.
Profound data loss.
The MasterChef presenter John Tory says he'll watch the programme fondly from afar after being sacked. It's after an allegation he used racist language was upheld, something he insists he has no recollection of. 2 men have been jailed for more than 4 years each for cutting down the sycamore gap tree in September 2023. The judge accused the former friends, aged in their 30s, of revelling in the thrill of it. The grandparents of a 2-year-old boy have been found guilty of his murder. Ethan Ives Griffiths was found severely underweight, dehydrated and bruised in North Wales in August of 2021. And Rachel Reeves is expected to urge UK regulators to avoid excessive caution later. The Chancellor will deliver her annual Mansion House speech to city bosses. Well, in the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 59 points at 89.38. The pound buys $1.33 and €1.15. LBC weather: heavy showers lingering over central and eastern England tonight. Light rain in the southwest, but generally dry elsewhere, a low of 8 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm James Kitchen.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Very good evening to you. It's 2 minutes past 8 on LBC. We're streaming this hour live on Global Player or the LBC app if you'd like to watch us as well as listen. That's because we have the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch, with us for the hour, taking your calls. Kemi, welcome back.
Thank you.
This is becoming a regular thing.
It is. Oh, and I have something for you.
Do you?
Happy birthday.
Oh,
I heard it was your birthday.
Sir Iain Dale, it says here. Should I be expecting something in the next honours
Are you not a
list?
sir already?
Sadly.
Well, I think it's a disgrace that has not happened yet.
I'd have preferred cake.
Cake next time.
Okay, all right.
But then you'd complain that I wasn't looking after your health.
I probably would, yeah, because I am diabetic. But thank you. Right, let's start off with what I think is the big news of the day, and it isn't John Tory being sacked from MasterChef. It is the fact that the government have made a statement in the House of Commons about the Afghan relocation scheme and what's happened, the super injunction, and that's been lifted. Now, most of this happened when you were in the cabinet. Now, I don't imagine you knew anything about it because of the super injunction.
It was before I was in the cabinet, but I only heard about it yesterday. So I had a briefing on it as Leader of the Opposition. It's the most extraordinary story. The number of people who knew very small. I think that apart from the super injunction, I think the Official Secrets Act was also brought in, which would have gagged ministers and civil servants. But I find it an extraordinary story on so many levels. One, that something like this could have happened and no one lost their job over it. This wasn't, and these things do occur. People make mistakes, and ministers have to take responsibility for it, even when it's a civil servant who's thrown the people under a bus, so to speak. Might have been a mistake, but as John Healey said, no one had lost their job over it. And the first thing that came to mind is that this is what people are angry about. That if you had been working in a job in the private sector and something like that had happened, you'd be out on your ear. And it just reminded me of one of the frustrations I had as a minister, that because you couldn't sack civil servants, they kind of knew that they could do whatever they liked. At worst, they'd be moved to another department. We were the ones...
Which is what's happened here.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. But it's also just a reminder of how that withdrawal from Afghanistan was so messy and how a lot of people were put in, very, very precarious positions. It's interesting that the government didn't ask for a super injunction, but one was given. So that indicates that the judges thought that something very serious could happen if those names had fallen into the hands of the Taliban.
The fact is there's been a secret relocation scheme with no parliamentary scrutiny about that. 4,500 Afghans have come under that secret scheme. Do you support that scheme?
So there was an original scheme, let's not forget, that actually brought in a lot of the translators and their families who we thought were at risk. That's where most of the people have come from. I think that's where we have about around 20,000. And this was an extra 900 or 600. So in the grand, scheme of the numbers, this is not a significant increase, but it is still something that harks to the fact that we end up just being a repository for everybody who needs safety, and there've got to be better ways of doing this. For many years while we were in government, we were taking many people from many places, but immigration is too high. You know, we had the Ukrainian refugee scheme, we had people from Hong Kong, we had Afghan translators. That's why, well, certainly it's one of the things that contributed to those sky-high numbers, and we need to get a grip on that.
Actually, to be fair, the sky-high numbers were largely people coming here on work visas.
But it's all of it. It's small boats, it's refugees, it's asylum. Yes, it is legal, people coming in legally. But the thing about those who come in on work visas is that you can withdraw those visas. It's not permanent. One of the things that we're bringing in as policy is trying to stop the conveyor belt of work visas to British citizenship.
But the fact is, the government have ended this Afghan scheme coincidentally, I think today, or so, at least sometime this month. Is that the right decision?
I think it is the right decision.
But don't we still owe a debt of honour to any Afghan citizen who helped Britain during those years?
I think that there are two things that we need to bear in mind. The first is, of course, making sure the people who help us are rewarded or looked after, not put in danger. But we also need to look after British national interest. And we cannot be in a situation where we effectively say that we are open to unlimited numbers of people because we feel an obligation. We also have to look at what we can do sustainably. Where are people going to live? What are they going to do for work?
But if you supported the secret scheme, I don't quite understand why you wouldn't support it being continued, or the official scheme being continued.
But the official scheme was not secret. I've only heard about this yesterday. I'm not sure I would have supported this additional scheme because many of those people didn't actually qualify for the original. They were just applicants, and as it stands, my understanding is that people haven't been put in danger. This is one of the reasons why the government can now say we're stopping the scheme. It's a very complex situation, but what I'm not in a position to do is go through the thinking that whoever the ministers were at the time had. It would all have been, under duress, in a rush situation, getting super injunctions. But we have to think about the world we are in now. The world we are in now is very different
James
from 4 or 5 years ago.
Your Shadow Defence Secretary, he apologised in the House of Commons for the leak. Would you repeat that apology on behalf of the Conservative Party?
Well, just on behalf of the government and on behalf of the British people, yes, because somebody made a terrible mistake and names were put out there and people's lives were put in danger. And we are sorry for that. That should not happen. And this is one of the tough things about, being a minister, which is why even the government, it's the Labour government now, this didn't happen when Labour were in power, they are apologising as well. You have to, as a government, take responsibility even for things that were nothing to do with you. But, and you end up even apologising for things that happened historically.
But I guess one of the issues is that some people will see this as Labour and the Conservatives in cahoots, both apologising, both saying there shouldn't be a public inquiry, as I understand it. And that would just drive more people to reform, won't it? Because they will say, well, here we are, the usual two-party politics, they agree with each other, they're both the same.
But if reform had been there, that civil servant would still have done the same thing. This is one of the things that a lot of people don't realise, that there's an assumption that if something happens under a government, it must have been an MP or a minister who did it. But actually, we move, we change. You can vote your MP out of power, but the civil servants don't. And one of the most frustrating things that I found as a minister was that you had good civil servants who you couldn't reward because you can't give those rewards. You also had bad ones who you couldn't sack. So the incentives are all wrong. And if you're a brilliant civil servant, actually a lot of the time the incentive is for you to keep your head down and do what your line manager or the perm sec asks you to do.
This civil servant has cost the taxpayer £850 million.
Quite.
And is still in a job.
Well, I think that is absolutely wrong. I think that there needs to be more ministerial power over this sort of situation where somebody has done something significant, they should be sacked. And I'm sure that the civil service will have a reason why they weren't sacked. Maybe it was someone senior who had authorised something. Maybe it was a problem with the computer system, or it might be a welfare reason that they can't disclose on behalf of the individual. They will have an excuse. But my view is that there's always an excuse. But you
would like to see a situation where a Secretary of State could override the permanent secretary in the department over whether somebody should lose their job for something like this?
Yes, this is something I have felt for a very long time. And when I talk about how we're going to need to change the way the civil service runs, the way government runs, this is one of the things that we need to change. Civil servants can get ministers into a whole heap of trouble. There are many ministers...
It sounds as if you've got the scars on your back on that one.
Well, people tried, but they couldn't get me because I was wise to what they were trying to do. And how
do you deal with something like that, though?
The first thing to do is to make sure you get the good people on side. And one of the things that tends to happen is that people assume that all civil servants are bad, but that's not the case. There are actually it's like any organisation. There are lots of good people. There are lots of sort of average people who just come in, because it's a job, and there's some that are truly terrible. And what you want to do is to incentivise the good ones and remove the bad ones. Instead, what tends to happen is that the good ones get a lot of hassle for actually doing what ministers want to do, and the incentives are for them to keep their head down. And eventually, if you make it through your civil service career, you get your gong at the end of it. That shouldn't be the way it works. We have got to change that system.
So that's how I need to get my gong.
Yes,
okay.
Get a job in civil service.
Unlikely, let's face it. Right, I was going to ask you about your opposition day today, but somebody's beaten me to it. It's Chris in Richmond. Chris, hi, what would you like to ask Kemi?
Hi, and happy birthday, Ian. And so, Kemi, why do you oppose scrapping the two-child benefit cap, but at the same time you're happy to give winter fuel payments to wealthy pensioners?
So the two-child benefit cap is one of those things that we believe needs to be a signal that we send about how we live within our means. We have child benefits, which is a separate benefit that is not limited to how many children you have. So people already get child benefit if they have 3, 4, 5, 6 children. The two-child benefit cap is specifically for those on universal credit and tax credit, where after you hit the two-child limit, you don't get any more. And we need to live within our means. One of the things that we're seeing is that the welfare bill is skyrocketing. There are a lot of people who are claiming welfare. This is separate from child benefit now, who shouldn't be. They should be in work. We need to tighten up the system. The rules have become very lax. And that's how we will save. We'll find savings. At the moment, the bill is set to be £100 billion a year on this trajectory. We cannot afford that. But the question you asked about winter fuel, my opposition to what Labour did was because they didn't tell people what they were going to do. When Conservatives went into the coalition government in 2010, we told people we're going to have to do difficult things, we're going to have to make cuts, and the party was elected with a mandate to deliver that. Labour did not have a mandate for winter fuel. Every election, every manifesto, they promised to keep it, and then that was the first thing they did. A lot of vulnerable people lost their winter fuel payments, and they didn't know how to fix it. Eventually, they U-turned. That's why we were critical of them. It's the dishonesty. If people want to make tough decisions, then be honest, tell people what you want to do, and make sure you get elected on that platform. Don't lie to them.
You made a speech recently where you said that we basically have a welfare system with an economy sort of attached to it.
Yes.
I mean, that's exaggerating the truth, isn't it?
Well, I'm using an illustration to explain how bad things are getting. I don't think a lot of people realise just how bad things are getting. And we need to make sure that we do not accidentally bankrupt ourselves with kindness. Of course, we need to have a safety net for the people who are most vulnerable. But we are now spending more on welfare than we are on defence. We are borrowing to pay welfare. We found about 1 million people left work post-COVID. Since Labour came in, we have an extra 1,000 people a day claiming sickness benefits. It was 2,000 in July. It's now 3,000 a day. We can't afford this.
So it's very difficult, though, to say to people, we're going to take away a benefit that you now are eligible for. And that quite a few politicians, I mean, Wes Streeting among them, have questioned the number of people being diagnosed with mental health conditions. And I think you've done that as well. That's quite a difficult message to persuade people, isn't it? Because, I mean, you're not a medical person. Wes Streeting isn't a medical person, yet you're trying to say that you know better than the medical people?
No, it was politicians who changed the system in the first place, and that's what we're elected to do. We are elected to make difficult decisions. We're not elected to ask doctors what to do and then do it. You can have civil servants doing that, and we've just had the conversation about civil servants. But what happened post-COVID was that there was an argument made that we should treat mental health conditions the same as physical conditions. We also moved to remote assessments because during COVID, we didn't want people coming in and getting ill. And what we're seeing is actually people ringing up saying, well, I can't come in for an assessment because I'm too anxious, and automatically getting benefits. And there are these people on Instagram, they call them sickfluencers, who tell you what to say, the script to give so that you can get benefits. People are cheating the system in many cases. There are others for whom the system has become too lax. If you have low-level conditions like anxiety you should be in work. Work will help you get better. Work is often the best therapy, and even the medical community says that.
But is neurodiversity a disability? I mean, so autism, ADHD, how would people with that fare under your system?
Well, what I'm not going to do is carry out diagnoses, but we know that the threshold is far too low. We have people with food intolerances claiming for motability, for the entitlement to cars. I didn't believe it when I first heard it, and my officials showed me the data from the DWP. That cannot be right, and I'm not saying that that's going to fix every single thing, but we need to start looking again at our system. We've made it too easy to claim benefits. There are 28 million people who are working in the private sector who support another 28 million who are either on benefits, retired, not in education, work or training, etc. And the rider is getting heavier than the horse. We need to fix that.
Chris, do you want to comment on what you've heard?
Firstly, I do agree with you, Kemi. There is an issue with the welfare system. The autism bit, I've got a child with the spectrum. I have to say, the idea that anxiety is a low-level condition, you're welcome to come and spend some with me. And as my daughter does GCSEs next year, I would strongly disagree with it's a low-level condition. On the issue of child benefit...
But Chris, it can be, can't it? This is the problem, in that there are some people with severe anxiety who probably ought to qualify, but then there are others with low-level anxiety who probably don't.
Well, I agree, and this is a problem. It's very difficult to generalise. We do need the face-to-face assessments. I completely agree. Although, again, mental health, having been through it myself, it doesn't necessarily show physical symptoms. Just on the child benefit cap, BPAS, abortion clinics, they have said that during COVID, women were basically being influenced partly by COVID, but also by the child benefit cap in terms of making decisions about their pregnancies. Kemi, I really hope that you understand that as you make policy of the Conservative Party, and this government does as well, because the idea that we force women into abortions when, frankly, they may have tried to take protective measures, which aren't always foolproof, that they're now driven to an abortion because of the child benefit cap, I think is abhorrent, Kemi. Do you not agree?
So, I think that that would be abhorrent, but what we can't do is use the most extreme situations to drive policy. Those will be at most a handful of people. We aren't talking about hundreds of thousands of women doing this. There are a lot of things that happened during COVID which weren't normal. We paid people, the government paid people to stay at home. That doesn't mean that those things need to continue. And there will be many other things that are underlying that sort of decision. But it's just a reminder that you still get child benefit. This is a benefit cap for universal credit. So they would still be eligible for child benefit. And this is one of the things that we're trying to untangle. Our welfare system is so big and so complicated and so nuanced, and we cannot be in a situation where we have more people on benefits than in work. And we're getting to a point where we're not going to be able to afford it. But the people who will really suffer, are those with the severe disabilities. As it is, the system is stretched. A lot of people with disabilities say they can't navigate the system. They don't have enough support. Many of the people who should be supporting them are being stretched to support others who should be in work. That's not fair on those people. And someone has to say, this is not fair, this is not sustainable, and it's only the Conservative Party that will say that.
0345 6060 973 if you'd like to put a question to Kemi Badenoch, the Leader of the Opposition. It's 19 minutes past 8.
This is LBC. www.bbc.co.uk/weather.org. Iain Dale, text 84850. This is LBC.
8:20 on LBC. Kemi Badenoch is here taking your questions. Mackie says, Kemi and Keir don't seem to dislike each other in the way that perhaps Keir and Boris did, or other prominent leaders such as Corbyn and Cameron. They almost seem to have a relatively friendly Thatcher and Kinnock-style relationship. I'm not sure that was particularly friendly, but anyway, albeit it's still in its infancy. Do Kemi and Keir ever meet for a coffee after PMQs? But they didn't last week. And if so, are these meetings cordial and friendly, as we know were the case with Thatcher and Kinnock?
It's interesting. It's a very interesting comment. I'm not sure Keir Starmer thinks that, but no, I don't. I don't hate him. I never really felt the same either. I think we've both got a job to do. We have to represent our various constituencies and our supporters, the people who share our values. I like to think that I'm quite robust with him. Some people complain that I'm not robust enough. Other people complain that I'm too robust. So it's probably in the right space.
You said a few weeks ago that you've changed your approach at PMQs because you've realised that people expect a bit of pantomime from it.
Yes, sadly, but yes, that is the case. I thought that because when I watched PMQs, I always watched it as if it was a courtroom and the Prime Minister is under interrogation by the Leader of the Opposition. So I started PMQs with all of my facts and statistics. I was looking at all the policy, and he just didn't answer any questions. And a lot of the times, because I didn't think he knew what I was talking about, I remember asking him about something that was in the education bill, and I could see him flicking through his papers. He didn't know what it was, but I also recognised that a lot of the people watching, either at home or in the chamber, couldn't follow the detail, and so I had to make it a lot simpler, and people enjoyed it when we were almost less serious and more panto, which is quite different from how I took it. I thought this is a very serious thing, but I think sometimes we shouldn't take ourselves too seriously. We take the job seriously, but not ourselves too seriously, and that's a good balance.
Just briefly before we come to the next question, last week with all the Rachel Reeves thing, you said that Rachel Reeves is looking thoroughly miserable. And of course, Keir Starmer sitting beside her wouldn't have really known that. Did you say that because you saw her crying?
No, she wasn't crying. I actually said it because
she had tears coming down her face.
After Keir Starmer refused to say she'd stay in the job, that's when I saw the tears. What had happened was she'd been jabbing and pointing at me, and it was so contrived. And I just thought, why are you pointing at me? You look so unhappy. And I just, said what I could see right in front of me. And I then asked Starmer, is she even still going to be in a job? And he, well, you're not going to be in a job, ha, ha, ha. And he just completely missed the human drama that was happening in the seat next to him, which I thought was quite astonishing. Because
apparently, and I don't know if you can confirm this, but I read that a couple of your whips had told the Labour whips that they thought that Rachel Reeves was in a spot of emotional turmoil, and they did nothing about it, because what you would have expected them to do is sort of say, well, would you like to leave the chamber because you're looking a bit...
Yes, I heard that after. I could see that she didn't look too happy, and she was sitting almost directly opposite me, but I hadn't understood all the drama that people had seen previously, because I just come in straight to PMQ, sit down. But it is true. They said that they had told the Labour whips they thought something was going on. I'm surprised that she turned up for PMQs. It's not compulsory. There were many times when, as a Secretary of State, I didn't go for PMQs because I had a meeting or something else, and no one really minds. It's not certainly not for us.
But you got a lot of criticism for being a bit heartless for your response about saying she was miserable.
Yeah, well, yes, but if I hadn't said it, I would have gotten a different bunch of criticism for not pointing out what was happening right in front of me, and people would say, she's not nimble, or she was too busy reading the script, and she didn't notice.
She hasn't scored an open goal.
Yeah, she didn't score an open goal. So, and to be leader of the opposition is to be criticised. To be honest, to be a politician is to be criticised. So,
right.
I think I did just about enough.
Let's bring another caller in. Anthony in Ashford in Surrey. Hello, Anthony.
Good evening, Ian. Happy birthday, and good evening, Kemi. My question is, good evening, what will your stance be on BBC reform at the next general election, given that Boris Johnson have pledged to get rid of the TV licence by 2027?
Well, yes, that was a promise that we had under the previous government. We're going to be reviewing all of this. I don't have any new policy on the BBC just yet. We're focusing on the bread and
What's
butter,
your gut?
Economy, immigration, and so on. My gut is that the BBC is making a lot of mistakes, and their coverage is geared towards a very metropolitan, very left-leaning audience. Some people might say you would say that because you're on the right, but there's always a story. I mean, today.
Some people might say that because you're on LBC.
Yes, exactly. Some people might say that because I am on LBC. But there's always something. If it's not Greg Wallace, it's John Tory. If it's not that, it's the Gaza report that went wrong. And I don't think it's an easy organisation to run, but we need to make sure that if people are paying a license fee, that their views are represented and their money isn't being used to stream, horrible acts at Glastonbury and so on and so forth. There's a broader question, which is a commercial question, about whether the license fee model actually works. There's a lot in the BBC that I think is fantastic. I think there is still something in the public service broadcasting that we do as a country that is very good. But increasingly, we see lots of things, especially on the entertainment side, where it feels like the BBC is trying to push an agenda.
The government says it still has confidence in the BBC, although, to be fair, Lisa Nandy has been quite critical in recent weeks. Do you still have confidence in the BBC?
Well, let's see where they get to in terms of how they handle some of these recent criticisms. I would like to see a model where people don't get threatened with going to prison for not paying their TV license. There are a lot of people who don't watch any BBC anymore.
There has to be some sanction.
They have to pay.
If people don't pay, there has to be some sanction, isn't there?
Well, I'm not sure that the model works anymore. Now, if you're asking me what should the new model be, those are the sorts of things that we're going to develop policy on. We were talking about the previous policy that Boris had. It wasn't that popular. There are many people who complain about the BBC, but they still believe that we have a better system than what we have in other countries. I just think that what we need is plurality. We need freedom of speech, no censorship.
But as of now,
and BBC should not be promoting particular views that are clearly.
But as of now,
agenda.
the government says it does have confidence. You, uncharacteristically, seem to be sitting on the fence, saying, well, let's see what they do. Sure. As of now, do you have confidence in the BBC or not?
Well, it depends. So, yes, you're right. On this issue, there is some fence sitting, because there's sometimes I watch, a BBC documentary and I think that was astonishingly good. And there are other times when I watch a news report and I just think, how can this be allowed? And, I make my complaints known. But what should the BBC be going forward? The other broadcasters aren't perfect either. I have things that I see on, Sky. I think that's probably not right. Sometimes, LBC, some of the presenters, I won't name any names,
Kemi,
just
honestly.
shocking coverage. But the BBC has a special position. Money is taken, effectively, it is a tax. The BBC licence fee is a tax, so they need to meet higher standards. If they cannot meet those standards, then some reform is needed.
So I'm taking this as if you were in power now, Tim Davie would, for the moment, be safe in his job.
Well, I would be hauling him in for loads.
Well, the government
has
done that.
Well, but what's happened since? I spoke to him about the thematic review they were having on a lot of their Israel coverage, for example, which I think has been absolutely appalling. But there are other aspects of the BBC that work well. There are things online, for instance, which I think the way that sometimes headlines are chosen, their fact-checking is not brilliant. But one of the things I believe in is institutions. The British institutions are really special, and we need to improve them and make them better, rather than just, make them go away. The licence fee is something which is very unpopular. If they're not able to serve the public, then that compulsion should go. That's something that I do believe in.
Talking of British institutions, I don't know if you're aware of this story. I'll show it to you here. A schoolgirl, 12 years old, was punished for wearing a Union flag dress on a day to celebrate diverse cultures in Britain. She was put in isolation.
I think it's a disgraceful story. It's an absolute disgrace. And it is because a lot of people don't even know what the word diverse means. They think diverse means not white. I've actually heard people talk about diversity where there was no diversity. It was just one particular race or ethnicity. And that needs to change. I think that that's something that should be investigated, because we need to build...
The school have apologised.
Well, that's good. But I think, what she would have suffered will stay with her for the rest of her life. We all need to be proud of our country. Britain is an amazing place. The Union flag is the most beautiful flag in the world as far as I'm concerned. And diversity means celebrating everyone, not celebrating people who are not white or not British. That's completely wrong.
Right, more calls to Kemi Badenoch over the next half an hour. 0345 6060 973. You're listening to LBC. It's 8:30. Let's get the latest news headlines from James Kitchen.
The Defence Secretary has refused to rule out the MOD using super injunctions in the future after a major data breach was kept secret. John Healey also told us nobody has lost their job over the leak, which put thousands of Afghans at risk of harm from the Taliban. The MasterChef presenter John Tory says he'll watch the programme fondly from afar after being sacked. It's after an allegation he used racist language was upheld, something he insists he has no recollection of. And 2 men have been jailed for more than 4 years each for cutting down the Sycamore Gap tree in September of 2023. The judge accused the former friends, aged in their 30s, of revelling in the thrill of it. LBC weather: heavy showers lingering over central and eastern England tonight. Light rain in the southwest, but generally dry elsewhere with a low of 8 degrees.
This is LBC.
Apply.
Leading Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
8:33, Kemi Badenoch is taking your questions. Gordon says, Robert Jenrick is the guest of honour at a forthcoming local Conservative Association meeting. I don't want to attend as I feel he's constantly on manoeuvres and undermining you. Am I wrong?
I think that you should attend. We need more people at those meetings because decisions get made. But I'm very sympathetic to a lot of what Rob has to deal with, because I used to have it. When I was in the cabinet, I was constantly accused of, promoting myself for leadership and so on. And I was just doing my job. And it's good the shadow cabinet members are attending these meetings, because that means that we're getting out there, we're explaining what our agenda is.
He's doing quite a lot of it, though, isn't he, all around the country?
Well, we have fewer MPs than ever before, so we need everybody to go around and do that speaking. And if we treat people as if they are on manoeuvres when they're speaking at associations and so on, then we'll have fewer people doing it. So, but if you have some tough questions for him, I would encourage you to go and ask him those questions. Ask him those questions directly, and then you'll get the answer.
OK, Stan says, in Exeter, I would love to ask Kemi how she feels about Brexit now, and should it be reversed? What do her party feel now? Donald Trump has described the way Britain left the EU as sloppy and said that Keir Starmer is smoothing this over.
So, Stan, no, I don't think Brexit should be reversed. I think that the people of our country voted for something, and we wasted enough time going round in circles rather than honouring their decisions. That's one of the reasons why it went wrong. And if we hadn't had 3 years of people trying to stop Brexit, we would have got a lot more stuff done before COVID hit. And if there are reasons why Brexit hasn't worked as well as it could do, and I do accept that, it's because we haven't been using the opportunities. We left the European Union, but we don't want to compete against them. You look at the deal that Keir Starmer brought back, still hasn't been signed, this EU reset, and it's about not diverging, but the EU makes some bad decisions. We need to diverge. We need to think for ourselves. We sort of lost our mojo, we lost a lot of confidence.
But is Donald Trump wrong when he describes Brexit as being handled sloppily?
Well, look how long it took for us to actually leave. I mean, that wasn't very good. And then there were different types of Brexit that could have been pursued. My fear is that we didn't do enough of the things that a centre-right government should do. And this is one of the things that I really want us to do now.
But you were business secretary.
Yes.
A lot of some people will say, well, you were in charge of reversing a lot of the EU regulations and you didn't do it.
But that's not true. I removed about 80% of the EU regulations. I ended the supremacy of the European Court of Justice. But just because a regulation came from the EU didn't mean that we didn't want it. Some of those things were our idea. And what we had was a piece of legislation that said until 2026, as and when we find more things we want to change and remove, we can do that. Labour hasn't used any of those powers. And what a lot of people wanted us to do was just delete all EU regulation without any thought about the consequences, who's going to be impacted. And I took the responsible decision that, I believe that we left the European Union, let's fulfill the will of the people, let's remove the regulations we know we definitely don't want, and let's keep doing that. But I'm not going to put businesses and others in a confused place.
Sure.
And
but
I
you
will end
you kind of are saying you think Donald Trump has a point, though.
Well,
was he right to say that?
We should be doing a lot better. There were many more opportunities. We should have got a US free trade agreement. Donald Trump wanted one with us. We were negotiating. Biden scrapped everything. That's what Keir Starmer should have been doing. Instead, he got a deal on tariffs that hasn't even reversed a lot of the damage. We're in a worse place now in terms of US trade than we were in January.
And are you going to play a round of golf with Donald Trump when he comes over next week?
I do not know how to play golf, but I think as I get older, this may be a pastime that I take up.
Right, let's go to more questions. Sybil is in Wandsworth. Good evening.
Hi, I'd just like to ask, Kemi, what's your position on the new humanitarian Gaza proposed city?
I have to confess, I don't know the proposals in detail. Can you tell me a little bit more specifically? What are we talking about?
This is something that the Israeli government are looking at, effectively putting 600,000 people in a very small area of Gaza, which actually some people within Netanyahu's party and indeed the opposition parties are calling the equivalent of a concentration camp.
Well, so we certainly don't want anything that's going to put people in a position where they're under extreme duress or under extreme hardship. As I said, I don't know enough of the details of this proposal to give a fair comment. I do know that a lot of the people in the Palestinian territories are suffering, but I also know that Israel has had a horrible thing happen, a monumental sort of massacre. They're still hostages, and they are trying to manage the situation as best as
But there's a massacre going on at the moment, isn't there? Apparently 798 people, including quite a lot of children, have been killed by the IDF as they've been waiting to get water and food from aid areas. Now, those of us who've always supported Israel find this a very difficult thing to I mean, you can't justify it, can you?
No, but I have spoken to the Israeli ambassador about some of these situations, and the bottom line is that Israel is at war. There will be things which occur, which are accidents, which they don't want to happen. They thoroughly investigate them. There are sanctions when things go wrong. So if soldiers do things that are outside, the law of war, they do get punished. I remember when there was that awful killing in the West Bank, the people who did it were arrested. So I'm not justifying any particular incident. I'm just saying that it's a really, really tough, really difficult situation. And I feel for people on both sides. But I firmly believe that all of this can and will end when hostages are returned, when Hamas is removed from terrorizing the people in the Palestinian territories, and they can actually get, some proper rulers who actually care about the people there.
Do you think effectively, though, Israel has already won, given that Hamas has been more or less neutered, Hezbollah is more or less neutered, Iran is now in its weakest point for 20 or 30 years. Israel has prevailed.
I think what Israel has been able to do, given the resources that it has and the number of opponents and enemies surrounding it, has been phenomenal. I think that it has prevailed. I wouldn't say that it has won, because it is still under threat. And, whenever I speak to Israelis, they talk about that being in a state of constant fear, that at any point in time there are several countries that want to just stop you from existing completely. I can understand that mindset of, eternal vigilance. That's where they are.
OK, Sybil, thank you very much. Let's go to Richard in Beverley. Richard, what's your question to Kemi, please?
Yeah, hello. I'd like to ask, bearing in mind that Jake Berry recently left the Tory party to go to Reform, what would you say to other MPs and members across the country who are going to follow his path or thinking of following his path?
One of the things that I really want to emphasise is that Reform is not a centre-right party. They want more nationalisation. They want more benefits. You'd have heard the conversation that we had about benefits. That's not what the Conservative Party is. I am making the Conservative Party more conservative, more fiscal responsibility, less net zero without a plan to execute it, without a plan to pay for it, living within our means. If people are leaving the Conservative Party now, that means they're not Conservatives. If they left, maybe a year ago or 2 years ago because taxes were too high, I might have understood that.
Well, hang on
but
a minute.
The reason why a lot of people are jumping ship now is because of polling. And this is a really important point, that there are some people who go into politics not because they want to help people, not because they want to make life better, but because they just want to be politicians. And they will go wherever the wind is blowing.
Are you really accusing David Jones, the former Secretary of State for Wales, and Jake Berry, a former chairman of the Conservative Party, sat with you round the cabinet table under Liz Truss? Are you really accusing them of not being proper Conservatives?
I'm saying that if people are leaving the Conservative Party because of polls, then they are not Conservatives. There might be some people who share some values, but we had this time last year. Do you remember Natalie Elphicke defecting to Labour? Do you remember, what was his name? The Suffolk MP, Dan, the doctor.
Dan Poulter.
There we go. Defecting to Labour. And then people were saying, oh, that means Labour is the real Conservative Party now. It wasn't. People often defect because they're just trying to get, it's a personal thing. What I want is a Conservative Party of people who are Conservatives. When I was knocking on doors at the last election, what a lot of people told me is that they don't know what kind of Conservative Party this is, or if this is a Conservative Party. We are now under new management. We're going to be very clear. It's going to take some time. We've just been kicked out of office. But if there's some people who want to short-circuit that and jump to the front of the queue with a party that's doing well in the polls now, doesn't mean that that's what they're going to be doing at the election time.
Do you feel...
Then I can't, I'm not going to stop them. They're making life easier.
Do you feel some people are judging you too early? I mean, I know you've been studying Margaret Thatcher's period in opposition, and as I've said before, I think there are some parallels between the challenges that she faced and the challenges that you face. But she didn't have social media commenting on everything that you do or don't do. She didn't have to do interviews every week or even every day, which you have to do because it's expected of you as leader of the opposition. You're only 8 months in, and yet people seem to be writing you off already.
It is what what I would say the commentariat class does to leaders of the opposition. It's almost like a test of resilience, that can we knock this person off their stride? And I'm not somebody who gets knocked off her stride easily. I've been through a lot worse than this. And throughout my life, people have been saying, well, you can't do that. You're not going to succeed. And I have, to use your word, prevailed. But I've done that by making sure I understood why I was doing the job, what my principles were, working hard. But if people are leaving the Conservative Party now over something like immigration, when we've really toughened the policy, I don't believe that that's really why they're leaving. And one of the things that I find really disheartening in politics is that there are too many people who only care about winning. They don't care about what they're going to do after they win. This is what happened to Labour. They were ready for an election. They weren't ready for government. They didn't have any plans. And now they're just grabbing everything. What can we do? They're in a tax spiral. Unemployment is up. The economy is shrinking. We saw GDP shrink, I think, 2 quarters in a row. They don't know what to do. That's what happens when people just tell you what you want to hear. Just think about winning.
So is Jake Berry lying? Because he's always struck me as a relatively moderate MP. I mean, things he said about net zero in the past. I mean, he's very pro net zero.
Well, maybe that's why he's leaving, because I've changed our net zero.
Farage.
Yeah, well, I've changed our net zero policy, and we actually have, a clear agenda on net zero. Nigel Farage launched his net zero policy, and everybody hated it on both sides. You just need to be clear about what it is that you stand for.
Have you ever, in the last 8 months, maybe in the last 2 months, got home at night, slammed the door and said to your husband, what is the point of this? Why do I bother? They just don't seem to get what I'm trying to do.
Never. Because I knew what I was getting myself into. I know my party. I love my party. And the thing is, as much as we Conservative members love our party, the rest of the public are not interested. They just want to know who's going to do right by them. And one of the things I really want to do is show who we are for. I think we tried to be for every single person, which is understandable, and we ended up losing a clear message of who we are for. And who we are for now is people who are going out, working hard every day, the people we call the makers. They're building things, growing things. Could be a nurse in a hospital or a plumber. But the people who are out there grafting, that's who we are for. They are suffering. They think things are too expensive. They can't get on. We want to make sure that they get on. Okay. And we want to stop those people who are cheating the system, however that works.
Right, we have 15 minutes more to take calls. 0345 6060 973. It's 8:46.
This is LBC. This is LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
8:48 on LBC. Let's go to John in Reading. Hello, John.
Good evening, Ian. It's always lovely hearing from you, and it's lovely even to speak to you as well. My simple question is, the housing market in this country is completely broken for young people in this country, and I would like to know how you would personally, reform the housing market to basically make it that young people can afford to actually get on the housing market. And may I add a suggestion?
Yes, yes, of course.
In the 1970s and 1980s, before a house could be sold in this country, you had to have a survey done before it went onto the market. Now, you don't need to get a survey done, which means that someone could basically get a house, be along the housing process for a couple months in, do a survey, and the person could back out, and you could lose thousands of pounds on a survey. Make it a legal requirement to have a survey done. It would save so much time, and it would increase the positivity of actually buying a house. It's a win-win.
Yeah, and a friend of mine has gone through that 3 times and I think has forked out about £6,000 in surveys and still hasn't got any property.
John, something similar happened to my husband and I when we were buying our first house together, where people had put a house on the market. They weren't actually serious about selling it, and we ended up spending all of this money on the paperwork and the surveyors' legal fees, and then they just decided they weren't selling anymore. And I think that is quite wrong. And this is one of the things that I think that needs looking at. I don't think it would solve the bigger problem on its own, but it's just one less bit of hassle that people would have. There's so much hassle in almost everything that we do.
The Scottish system is different, isn't it? And I think that does incorporate that. There's too much hassle in people's lives. Whether you're buying a house or you're driving, 21 miles per hour, you get a speeding ticket. You're trying to get your kids to school, and there's some new thing that you've got to do. And one of the things that we want to do as a party is just lift the burden and make life easier. And I was talking at the weekend about having a big reset, like a big post-COVID reset. And housing is one of those areas where there's a lot we could do. Well, Rachel Reeves is talking about this in her Mansion House speech in just a few minutes. And apparently she's going to suggest, according to some sources, that mortgages should be offered without any deposit. Now, haven't we been there before?
We have been there before. And this is a decision that I think banks should take themselves. It would help with certain people buying, but it increases demand. And to John's question about how we fix housing, we need to actually reduce the demand in one particular way. That is immigration. We've had too many people coming to the country, but we haven't built for those numbers. We really need to bring the numbers down. That will take some pressure off. We need to increase supply, so more house building where there is infrastructure. I'm afraid that does mean a lot more in the cities, especially London. Labour are doing the exact opposite, reducing the targets on the cities. And then the final thing is dealing with the asset bubble post the financial crisis. We've just not fixed it, where people just put their money in housing because it's a safe place to put money you can't lose, and instead of stocks and shares, and that makes the prices of houses just higher and higher.
Now, I could interpret that as you wanting to increase capital gains tax.
No, that's not what I said.
No, but if you think that the asset bubble has gone too far,
but I don't think,
how do you stop that?
Well, by making other types of assets attractive. And what's been happening is that we're not making returns. We're not making returns on stocks and shares, and that is because it is so hard running a business, being an entrepreneur. You look at what Labour did with their last budget, increasing employers' NI. That just meant that a lot of businesses gave up. They're sacking people. They're not hiring staff. Some are just closing down completely. We need to make sure that we have a vibrant economy. You look at the high street, shops closing down. If we're going to solve housing, we need to do all of these things. That will make life easier for young people, and then we can look at things like, mortgages without deposits. Then we can look at, we had policies like Help to Buy, but what they did was actually bid up the price of housing rather than deal with the structural issues that are underlying it. But at the end of the day, if young people can't buy homes, they don't start families early, they don't put roots down in the community, and all of these things make the country worse. It's a crucial issue that needs to be fixed, and we will have a plan for it.
John, thank you. A text from Albert who says, does Kemi think 4 years and 3 months is a fitting punishment for those 2 morons who cut down that ancient tree?
Well, Albert, I think if you're calling them morons, you certainly think it's a fitting punishment. I think they did something really terrible, and I am somebody who believes that punishment does work. People need to know that if you do something wrong, you will be punished. We need more enforcement in our country.
But what good does it do sending these 2 people to prison? They're hardly likely to reoffend. Surely that's one of the reasons you send people to prison. Do we not have to think of more acute punishments for people that affect their everyday life? For example, take the houses away from them or something like that. Well, that would really affect them.
It would, but...
they'll be out in 18 months.
Well, Well, yes, indeed. It will be half the sentence if they're on good behaviour. At the moment, prison is the punishment that we have. I do think there are other things that we should do. Bigger, higher fines for those who it'll make a difference. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that if someone does something wrong, they know that they will be punished for it. You look at what's happening with the prevalence of mobile phone snatching and shoplifting. This is happening because there's not enough enforcement. We just need to enforce.
Right, let's go to Joseph, who's a new caller in Winchester. Joseph, very good evening. What would you like to ask Kemi?
Good evening, Iain. Good evening, Kemi. My question is can Kemi confirm, as the leader of the Conservative Party, if you are in the ECHR or are you going to opt out of the ECHR?
So we are currently reviewing what we need to do if we leave the ECHR. So I have always said that the ECHR is not a silver bullet, but I'm increasingly of the view that we have to leave. Leaving it alone is not going to solve the border problem. But one of the things that we're not doing again is what happened with Brexit, where we said we'll leave and then we'll work out the plans later. If we're going to leave, we need to tell people this is what we're doing and this is how it's going to happen. We need to answer the difficult questions like what's going to happen with Northern Ireland. And we need to look at the other laws that are affecting borders, the Refugee Convention, for example, some of the other things that the UN has brought out. So we have said that at party conference, we will show our homework and explain what it is we're going to do to control borders around the ECHR. You've kind of preempted the review
already, haven't you, by saying that you now think that we should leave?
Well, we set 5 tests. I don't see how those tests would be made, but I've given it to a brilliant but neutral lawyer who's going to answer the questions. A test on whether we can deport the people we want to, a test on, making sure our veterans aren't hounded, fairness, can we make sure that British citizens are first in the queue for things like social housing without having to give it to everybody who comes in on asylum first, and so on. That's what we need to do, a properly thought through process. What I'm not going to do is what Reform are doing, saying we're going to leave. They don't know how they're going to leave, they don't know what you need to leave, and people who say that without doing the thinking end up not delivering.
But your position has moved since the leadership campaign. You came across as quite sceptical about leaving the ECHR, and yet now you're saying, well, I think we should. We're not quite sure what effect it will have, but we'll have those answers by October. James Cleverly, former Foreign Secretary, leadership contestant last time, as you well remember, he is, the media are painting him and Europe being as odds on this. He thinks that, you've said it wouldn't be a silver bullet.
Yes.
He says it wouldn't be a silver bullet, and he doesn't think it would have the effect that certainly Robert Jenrick and other people in the Conservative Party seem to think it would have. And you were saying that at the conference.
But listen to what I'm saying, that ECHR alone is not going to fix the problem. And what I said at conference was that we're going to look at the thing properly, and that's what we're doing. I have been consistent, but the more I see, the more I believe that without leaving, there are some things we won't be able to fix. But I want an answer on, if we do leave, what does that mean? What I don't want to do is say we're going to leave and then start apologising later because somebody forgot about, the Northern Ireland Protocol or, the Good Friday Agreement.
So your slightly more robust stance on this now, that's nothing to do with the effect of Reform or the effect of some people on the right of your party who want you to be a bit more robust.
Because remember, I never said we're staying in the ECHR.
No, you didn't.
So I am always honest.
Nor did you say you wanted to leave, which you are now saying.
Well, I'm saying I think we do need to leave, and I've set 5 tests. So my thinking is always based on a plan. But every day there is a new story about something ridiculous. Somebody can't be deported because their child can only eat chicken nuggets, or someone can't be removed. Rapists, murderers. This is shocking. And I think the thing that was really the tipping point for me was the grooming gang scandal, where there are people who should have been deported, and I read the case notes and I just couldn't believe what I was reading. They used the ECHR as a way to try and stop themselves from being deported. And I thought, actually, do you know what? This is now crossing beyond the realms of credulity. And as any serious government knows, protecting borders is one of the things that only government can do. And I have always said, I did say this during the leadership contest, if we need to leave the ECHR, we will leave. So what I've set this review on is, do we need to leave? I think so. Answer these 5 questions about deportations, about veterans and so on.
You know how you always look forward to the quickfire questions?
No.
We've run out of time. So I'll just ask you, what are you going to do over the summer? Are you going to see Oasis? Are you going to have a nice family holiday? Are you going to look back in anger at Jake Berry?
No. I never look back in anger. If people want to leave, I think if you really love something, you let it go. This has always been my mantra. Trying to force people to stay. So you love Jake
Berry? Is that what you're telling me?
No, not go that far. But I do hope to spend some more time with my children. I'm nearly forgetting what they look like, but I'm not going to any concerts. I certainly haven't planned to.
Right. Kemi, well, we look forward. Hopefully we can do this again in September. Thank you very much indeed for spending time with us over the last hour. Now, in the next hour, it's a slightly delayed cross question. We have with us Kemi's Shadow Cabinet colleague, Andrew Griffith. He's the Shadow Business Secretary and MP for Arundel and South Downs. Luke Murphy is Labour MP for Basingstoke, making his debut. Reem Ibrahim is Communications Manager of the Institute of Economic Affairs. And our very own Aggie Chambray, LBC's political correspondent, will be joining me to take your calls. You might want to ask about the Afghan relocation scheme. You might want to ask about Rachel Reeves' Mansion House speech, which I don't think she's yet given. You might want to ask about something that Kemi might have said over the last hour. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock. The Defence Secretary has told us that nobody has lost their job over a major MOD data breach, putting thousands of Afghans at risk. The personal details of those seeking safety in the UK after supporting the British military